Hi, folks. Welcome to this quick Gradebook supervision refresher for our division-wide Professional Development Day. Today is September 16th. This is a repeat session of the details shared during Learning Services Summer Institute in August. Let's focus our discussion today on how effective gradebook supervision might help us fulfill LQS expectations. Why does it need to be done in the first place? So if we take a closer look at that LQS under providing instructional leadership, we can see that there are three parts that apply to gradebook supervision in terms of our teacher quality standard, looking at instruction aligning with our program of study, and ensuring that assessment and evaluation practices are fair, appropriate, and evidence-informed. But even before we go there, let's make sure we're on the same page first. How we use the language of assessment is very important. Assessment is the foundational piece to what we do. So if we consider the etymology of the word assess, it comes from a Latin verb, which means to sit next to or beside. So as an assistant or attendant or aide. In the educational context, the process of observing learning, that is assessment. We're gathering information about. So in terms of grading and reporting, though they're related to assessment, they're not interchangeable. So to grade is to analyze the evidence of student learning, take a look at the evidence gathered from an assessment. So what a student shows that they know through product conversations and observations, and then evaluate it, assign a score to that work. And as we do this, we evaluate their work set against a standard. Whereas reporting is actually the act of sharing assessment information and grades with stakeholders. And of course, we don't have to grade every single thing with a score. We can do things as an assessment that we're just going to give descriptive feedback on. And of course, grading and reporting are related is because we almost always report our grades. So how can we fulfill 6G of the LQS? How can we ensure that assessment and evaluation practices are fair, appropriate, and evidence-informed? So there are a few things we can look at that tell us a teacher employs effective assessment practice. And the first one is to see if the teacher has planned with the end in mind. So this might be a familiar image from our Alberta Assessment Consortium. And the AAC begins looking at teacher assessment practices with planning in the end in mind. So really that means looking at this portion of that particular graphic. We're looking at starting with what are students going to learn. So we have that already established as our program of studies. After that, then the teacher needs to decide, how am I going to know that the learning has happened? And then the teacher needs to plan intentionally for making sure that the students can show me what I'm expecting to see for evidence of learning. But what does this have to do with the gradebook? Well, let's think about it. What is the purpose of a gradebook? Just think about it for a moment. Why do we have gradebooks in the first place? So by now you may have come up with a few ideas, but just look at these ideas that came up during our September session. If teachers have planned effectively, then they may have pre-populated their gradebooks with assessments to be published at appropriate times during the term. This helps our teachers stay on track and assist them in long-range planning. And even before populating those gradebooks with assessments, they actually do need to consider what are they going to accept as evidence of student learning. Not so much what a student will produce, but what conceptual and procedural knowledge students will demonstrate. And as our students learn, teachers can use their gradebooks to store and communicate grades. Yes, that part feels a little bit obvious to most of us, but also our descriptive feedback. Okay, and a gradebook can also tell teachers and us as administrators if an outcome has been assessed multiple times, if we've got a balance of assessments in there, if there's a group of outcomes that hasn't been assessed as many times. So if these are the purposes of the gradebook, then how can a gradebook be used to determine in what ways and to what extent our teachers are meeting Section 3C of the TQS? So that is what we're focusing on today. We are going to focus on effective gradebook supervision that helps us answer those questions. So first, we're going to take a look at how gradebooks should be set up, okay? And then we're going to take a look at what evidence might be present. Okay, I'm going to share some resources to help you navigate the gradebook. And then later in this term, hopefully in October, we'll start taking a look at how we can engage teachers in that conversation. So looking at this first question, how should the gradebook be set up? This is talking about basic software fluency and adhering to the protocols as set by ECSD to ensure that the tool, PowerTeacher Pro, performs the way we need it to. So there are some checklists that you can find on our assessment and reporting SharePoint site. So once you visit the SharePoint site, you can just click on report cards and then you can just scroll down on the report card preparation page to find the list of these checklists. And I'm going to go through the major points of these checklists right now. So starting with class descriptions. With class descriptions, this is something that is in the settings portion of PowerTeacher Pro. So in our high school setting, it's mandatory to have the grading rules and course description right there in the class description, or at least a link to the course outline that explains that. Students who are relying on their grades for post-secondary admissions, scholarship applications, etc. This is very important. So they deserve to know how their grade is being determined. So that's why it's mandatory there up in high school. We do recommend that in junior high as well, because it is the first time in Edmonton Catholic schools that we see students earning traditional grade, because in elementary, so grade 6 and below, there are no traditional grades. It's levels of achievement on outcomes. There's no overall percentage. So if your teachers need help learning how to do your class descriptions, there's this YouTube video here to teach people how to navigate and create a class description. So little tip, every time you see this YouTube icon here, that's telling you that there's going to be a link in the description below. So next we have our traditional grade calculations and how we're going to set that up. So again, in grade 6 and under, we don't have traditional grades. We don't have percentages overall for the course. So we are not going to calculate an overall class grade. So that's why it needs to look like this part with the green check mark. Now, if you are in a school that only goes up to grade 6, this has been done for you already. If you're in a school that goes beyond grade 6, then please consult the video associated with this to make sure that you turn this off manually. Now, please keep in mind, the video as I'm speaking now was made a year ago with last year's guidance on which categories to use. And we're going to talk about the categories to use right away, but just keep in mind that these videos are for assisting with software fluency. And please do always consult the Division Standards for Assessment and Reporting for specific requirements. We are updating these videos as quickly as we can, but that document is always going to stay up to date. Traditional grade calculations for secondary school, we are looking at setting those calculations according to the course outline or the department and school policy. This is not new at all. Next, we have our categories for early learning. Again, this hasn't changed at all. So in case we're going to engage in some deeper discussions about categories, categories are used to organize tasks into bins. And traditionally, it's for the purpose of calculating an overall percentage grade. In early learning and elementary, however, we don't calculate an overall percentage grade. So in these cases, they're just used for communication purposes only. In fact, Power Teacher Pro, that program has been written such that you cannot make an assignment without first attributing it to a category of some sort. So that's why categories are here. So remember, 100 Voices teachers may use evidence of learning only. And let's remember, in early learning, assignments are not given levels of achievement. In elementary, this is new. We added ongoing assessment last year as a category elementary teachers could have chosen. And we did this because a lot of feedback during our pilot year and our first implementation year was that the previous two categories, progress check and summative assessment, were barriers to teachers inputting data, assessment data into their gradebooks until they were ready. They weren't sure which category to use. So since we are an ongoing outcomes-based assessment and reporting a school division, we offered up the ongoing assessment category. Feedback from that edition was phenomenal. Teachers really liked it, and it was much easier for them to reconcile their idea of reporting progress and categorizing it at the same time. In secondary, the final exam category is the only one that must be used from the division standpoint, and only final exams can go into this category. All the other categories can be created by the teacher, and it's just really important to know that the teacher needs to make sure that their weightings of the categories are matched what's on the course outline and as communicated to the students and the families. And the reason why we need this final exam category, the one created by the school division, we need teachers to use this one, is so that it can be properly reported from one teacher to the next, one school to the next in PowerSchool. Now, last year, there were a few situations where a student grade wasn't properly calculated. That means it wasn't calculated according to the course outline because the teacher had inadvertently attributed an assignment to a category that was not used in the traditional grade calculation. So I have a video right here for you, again, link in the description below, that will show teachers how to deactivate categories that they will not use for a course. So for instance, if I am teaching elementary music at JH Picard, well, that also contains secondary. So I will have to make sure I turn off the final exam category. I will have to make sure I turn off any other category that I have available in there except for ongoing assessment. And if I'm teaching 100 Voices, evidence of learning. All right, now as for comments, this hasn't changed at all since last year whatsoever. So programming statements are in the term comment with a date, and we're going to do this for every subject for which the student receives a special programming, and please do it as soon as you are aware of any special programming. So if they're an English language learner, if the student is on an IPP or receives accommodations. As for the practice of leaving summary comments like we did prior to 2018 with using Illuminate for reporting, that's not happening anymore. And it was, I always remember fondly that first time we talked about this sort of thing with our pilot elementary schools, telling them, no, you don't have to do this anymore, because the comments are going to happen in real time and parents can track it as we go. So I'll never forget their smiles. They were very happy about that. So if you have any questions about it though and how that might work, please let us know. The only other instance where we need to have a term comment in pre-K to 9 is if the student has switched sections somehow. So if they've switched schools, if you were in a block 1 chemistry 20 class, now you're in a block 2 chemistry 20 class or what have you, we need to put that in. For high school, again, we are encouraging teachers to include recommendations for the next course for term comments. All other comments are at the discretion of the teacher. So now that we've been through the broad strokes of these checklists, just stop and consider, How might you utilize these checklists at the beginning of the term to help teachers get a good start with their gradebooks for the term? So really be specific here. When we did this during our Summer Institute in August, administrators started with, talking about when are they going to do it, how much time they were going to give to their teachers to work on this. But then it became a little bit more tricky when they were prompted with, well, how will you follow up about it? How might you address concerns if a teacher hasn't done this yet? So there's some lots of good ideas there in that Summer Institute where people were thinking, okay, well, you know what, maybe we'll give them 30 minutes at halfway through the staff meeting and just let them go get a coffee break and come back and get started on making sure their gradebooks match their checklist. When we talked about how we could follow up, some of our administrators had suggested invite them to grab a buddy, and they can invite another teacher to look and help double check to make sure that they set it up all right. This is an invitation, not a mandatory piece. So if they would like to do it, that they may, but if they are not going to do it that way, just please let the administrator know, and the administrator will go ahead and take a peek and help you with your gradebook. So there were lots of different ideas coming out in that discussion in the Summer Institute, and I would love to hear what you come up with for how you're going to help your teachers by using these checklists. So let's move on to the next bit. What evidence might be present in gradebooks to indicate student learning? Because this is when we're thinking about demonstrating a professional body of knowledge. It's really important for us and our teachers to keep this portion of the TQS in mind when it comes to assessment and evaluation. And ever since we started piloting this, lots of questions came up, and they all centered around these three ideas. How many assessments are required, Jennifer? How many comments are required? How many outcomes do I need to assess when? And I know that this became quite frustrating for administrators, and I thank you for being patient with me and just giving my responses some space in your minds, because most of my responses centered around these ideas. All right. If you want to know how many assessments are required, how does the quantity of assessment relate to the quality of assessment? I can give a Mad Minutes little quiz every other day, every third day. And what would that mean? Does that really show me standard of excellence or proficiency or beginning? Is that a type of assessment that if I only do that, or that's what I do most of the time, does that make level of proficiency on an outcome valid? Well, I guess it depends on what that outcome is. If I look at the quantity of assessments, I want to think about what factors could influence the quantity of assessments. If I'm going to be working with a group that needs a little bit more prompting, a little bit more scaffolding, then I might have more formative assessments in that class than I might have had in the class I had last year. And looking at comments, how does that relate to quality of comments? Are we using our comments just for, praise or criticism? Like you forgot this, do better next time, or good job? Or is that comment going to help move the learning forward? So if it's you forgot this, well, if it's you forgot to put your name at the top of the sheet again, that's not helping really to move the learning forward unless that's one of your outcomes. So let's relate those comments to our outcomes. We also want to think about how we are including multiple modes of assessment. That's part of TQS3. I know that those of us who are teaching older students, we have a tendency to lean heavy on this product side. And I know that our elementary counterparts, our elementary teachers, rely a little bit more on the observations and conversation side of this, especially for our grade 3 and under. How can we make it balanced so that we have multiple ways of determining what a student knows, understands, and can do? When we're talking about comments on assessments, then we really need to think about what is our professional reasoned judgment. Is it about the assessment in relation to the learning expectation? Is it necessary? Is it feedback that's going to improve learning or progress? Okay. It's going to be at the teacher's discretion, not for every student on every assessment. And the guidance remains the same, K to 3, we're going to direct it towards the parent. And once they're in grade 4, we can start with that gradual release of responsibility. And it's going to depend on our kiddos. Eventually, we want our students taking ownership of their learning. So by grade 9, we should be able to make these comments towards our students themselves. It might be earlier for some, later for others. So if you would like to learn more about assessment and reporting and timelines, etc., visit our Sharepoint site and click on Division Standards for Assessment and Reporting, and you will see this document right here. This part is going to address that question we always get is how many outcomes and which outcomes and when. So there's two really important things here. Number one, never ever put a reporting standard on an assignment. So that's something we talked about last year. The implication of putting a reporting standard on an assignment meant that the reporting standard showed up multiple times on the report card. So we're not going to put a reporting standard on the assignment. We're going to put the specific outcomes on the assignment. And the next important thing about outcomes is follow the pacing guides. When our consultants were working on this in August of 2020, the first iteration of pacing guides, the first thing that went through my mind was, oh my heavens, if I have to teach elementary, which I have not taught before, this pacing guide would save me. Because it would tell me what to teach and when to teach it. And that sometimes is the first step. Follow those pacing guides and also understand that not every outcome needs to be assessed. Again, we're looking at a reasoned professional judgment. Now here's another new bit. Our levels of achievement this year for grades 1 to 12 are new. They were developed by our assessment steering committee throughout last year. That committee was comprised of professionals from each division level, so Div 1, 2, 3, and 4, and those professionals included a teacher, an assistant principal, and a principal, plus a few consultants, director of curriculum and instruction, and the superintendent of learning services. What we did was we examined the levels of achievement that we had, and we asked ourselves, how does it support communication of a student's ability or proficiency with the outcomes? Does it use language that matches Alberta education and qualifies where a student is in their learning? The previous levels of achievement criteria had a lot of quantifiable descriptors, most of the time, some of the time, etc. Whereas in this new one, developed over many months, our steering committee made this to be a lot more about the quality of how the student demonstrates their learning. Many of you have already reached out to me and my team to talk about, I'm very excited about this because this can be our hinge point where we take a look at re-examining our assessment so that it also supports understanding of the level of proficiency of our students. So I invite you to consider, how might you introduce the new levels of achievement to support the learning process of your teachers and of your students? So the assessment team, we are ready to work with your staff to unpack these levels of achievement. In fact, there are two sessions running on September 16th about unpacking the levels of achievement. So I hope some of your teachers are there. If you or your teachers didn't have a chance to visit these two sessions, just let us know and we can see what we can do about making sure we put together something for your school. Now, when we are looking in our gradebook for evidence of learning, we also must consider, what does the balance look like? Oftentimes, we talk about formative assessment and summative assessment, but we also have these concepts of assessment of learning and assessment for and as learning. And the reason why we like to emphasize the of, for, and as learning more so than formative and summative is because formative and summative gives us this idea, this false dichotomy in the way of thinking about assessment. Really, assessment is about what are we using it for? What is its purpose? So if we talk about assessment for and as learning, then we're talking about goal setting, self-reflection. How are we using this information to inform instructional decisions? How are our students, pardon me, using this information to inform their learning decisions and setting their own goals? Assessment of learning. This is interpreting the results of a summative assessment, using your reasoned professional judgment to evaluate a student's learning against the outcome. For those of you who are wondering about navigating the gradebook, there is a playlist that I invite you to visit. And it's on Teaching Mama on YouTube, and I will put a link in the description below. If you have any questions about navigating the gradebook to supervise assessment for reporting, assessment and reporting, please just give your assessment consultant a call. So let's practice a little bit, shall we? Let's look at this. What does this gradebook tell you? Do you know enough about this subject to make a judgment? And what questions do you have? So looking first right up here at the Unit B exam bit, I wonder, Unit B, what were they learning? I understand its categories as Unit B, but what is it all about? I'm looking at the categories and I'm thinking, is this teacher determining grades based on the type of task they're completing or on the outcomes students are learning? Here's the Unit B exam. I'm looking, okay, all these students, this student has a comment. All right, if they have a comment, it makes me think that the teacher is thinking about, something specific to the student. I also see this little symbol right here, this one that shows auto-calculate. So I know that that means that when I put in the 73, the level of achievement equivalent fills across in all the outcomes. This can be a great tool to help my teachers speed up the process. But if I'm looking through here and I'm seeing that everybody is identical levels of achievement for all 4 outcomes that were assessed in this exam, it does make me wonder, did this teacher auto-calculate, enter in these scores, and walk away? Or did the teacher actually go through the assessment of each child's work and determine that for all the parts of the assessment that we're looking at B.1, whatever that might be, if they all got exemplary, and now that we have a new level of achievement, we can say that it is a standard of excellence now. Did the teacher look and make sure, confirm that this student was standard of excellence, standard of excellence, standard of excellence, standard of excellence? Because typically what I might see is if someone got an 88 down here, maybe it's because for 3 of them, the student showed standard of excellence work and understanding, but for 1 of them, perhaps that student was in fact at an approaching. Perhaps they were having a struggle there. So these are the things it makes me think of. I also really want to know, what were they learning? Unit B doesn't tell me much. Here's another one. First, I'm seeing, oh, look at that. Look, there's a comment. It tells me why she got an AP. Let's see. Oh, there's a assignment description, and it tells us how the student was to be successful. Include what's the device, how it uses light to function, what the device was used for, and a picture. And the title of this tells me exactly what this assessment was all about. I wonder about these categories though. because we're looking at using ongoing assessment this year. So it makes me wonder, is it worth it to me for this teacher to have them go back and change all of these things? Or is the conversation going to be, okay, I see that you did this and I know that's what we did last year, but from now on, please use the ongoing assessment category. Because again, in elementary, these categories are not for calculations, for communication only. So when you're speaking with your teachers about their assessment practices and gradebooks, please always start with the end in mind. Start with the principles of Assessment 360. Start with taking a look at your gradebook. Is it all set up just so? Make sure you're on the same page with your teachers in terms of what is assessment, how is it related to grading, how is it related to reporting. You are welcome to bring in this graphic as prompts to speak to your teachers as well. You might have some teachers who show a lot of strength here in the assessment for and as learning portion of the graphic, but establishing criteria based on learner outcomes is an area of growth for them. So this will help you with the language when having a discussion with your teachers. Also, the teaching quality standard is an excellent way to start, as this is our regulatory body. These are the expectations for teachers in Alberta. Now, a few more things before we wrap up. First, reading assignments. We get a lot of questions about the reading assignments. What are they supposed to look like, etc. So our language arts consultants have the reading assignments all set up on their Sharepoint site. If your teachers are unsure of how to use a flag versus IEA, or insufficient evidence to assess, these are, the IEA is a code that was it was clearly needed for during our initial COVID lockdown in beginning in March 2020, and this is to be used over time. Flags, we use those all the time. Flags look like this, plus the green check mark that you'll see, the completed check mark. And please just put these in the score column. They're information only. Whereas IEA, it tells us that the student has not participated in or produced enough conversation, observable actions, or products to allow the teacher to exercise their informed professional judgment about student learning and achievement. Another thing you want to take a look at is that we would like to gather evidence over time. And this is why we are not using IEA for just an assignment. IEA is for after we have tried our best to triangulate assessment for the student on this cluster of outcomes, and we cannot anymore. So keep notes wherever possible. It doesn't mean that each outcome needs 3 different assessments. Try means 3, but it doesn't mean to have 3 each time. The verb triangulate means to locate precisely using reference points. So the reference points are evidence of learning that you have observed or collected over the term, and you're locating exactly where they should be using your reasoned professional judgment based on those reference points. That's what it means to triangulate. I know this one comes up quite a bit, this orange squiggle or professional judgment indicator. This is very important for all of us to understand. PowerTeacher Pro uses the most recent 3 levels of achievement to determine an overall LOA. The orange squiggle is just like PowerTeacher Pro is a person saying to you, hey teacher, guess what? You assessed this student multiple times and they did not perform consistently. Could you please double check that this is correct? That's all it's saying. So if a teacher comes in here and they say, it's correct, they can leave it. An orange squiggle, the professional judgment indicator, is not a bad thing. Okay, it's a tool to help alert us of some sort of discrepancy. So to verify outcomes, to learn how to do it, you can come to the link that I'm going to put here in the description. And this can be found all on our Sharepoint site. So let's come back to this. We have explored in a relatively short period of time, just scratch the surface on how effective gradebook supervision can help fulfill LQS expectations. We looked at how teachers can meet the teaching quality standard. We looked at how we can make sure students are instructed with the learning outcomes from the program of studies. And we've looked at the different types of assessment and evaluation practices that may be evident in the gradebook. A few more things. As you may already know, there is no summary report in January. So that means we need to find a way to make sure our parents are checking PowerSchool Parent Portal regularly. We have a parent guide to assessment and reporting on our public website, but supporting our parents in the shift is going to be key to making sure that all of this communication isn't just one way. We're not speaking into a void. So think about what you could do. I know some schools had PowerSchool stations at the front office, so if parents needed to check because they didn't have access otherwise, it was available for them. There were tutorials for parents. I have a video that you can share with parents. You can send home swift messages to parents to say, hey, it's September 30th. Your child has been learning. Do you know what they're learning and how well they're learning it? Please click here. Something along those lines to prompt our parents to go take a look and help them get into the habit. But again, we need to make sure that our teachers have something in there for the parents to view. And one of the biggest challenges for our teachers in the last 2 years has been establishing a routine, getting into the habit for regular and frequent entries into the gradebook, as opposed to binge reporting right before demo of learning, let's say. So think about what supports might you provide teachers to help them establish a routine for regular and frequent entries into the gradebook. Some administrators have suggested giving them 10 minutes every Thursday, partway through or at the beginning of the staff meeting. I know one administrator before COVID, she had popcorn and Power Teacher Pro parties on Thursday afternoons, not every Thursday afternoon, but whenever she could. And they would just hang out together in the learning commons, and she gave them all popcorn, and they sat and they worked and they collaborated, and it was great conversation. Talk to each other, ask each other, and I'd love to hear what you do to support your teachers in this way. And finally, there may have been some murmurings out there about the outcomes-based assessment and reporting pilot for high school. So if you are an administrator at a high school, or if you have friends who are at high school wondering about this, here are a few details. It's going to be grade 10 academic cohort only. We're starting in February, just 2 of our schools. And we've already started the professional learning piece to support the move to outcomes-based reporting. Outcomes-based assessment, we are already well on our way. And that is it for today, everyone. If you have any questions at all, please contact your consultant from the assessment and reporting team. My name is Jennifer, and I'm happy to take your calls and your questions and even just a little hello. I hope everyone's having a great start to their year. Thanks so much for watching, and have a great day.